Today we're talking about life, triggers, and your stuff. Welcome to Living the Savvy Life, where you can learn how to define the life you want to live and create a plan to fund it. It's all about purposeful spending. My name is Melissa Tosetti, and this is my colleague.
Hi, I'm Kevin Gibbons.
I first noticed this pattern of life and of triggers and the accumulation of stuff with my in-laws. They had lived in this beautiful two-story home overlooking the San Francisco Bay for 30 years. My father-in-law ran his liquor store. He had a successful liquor store business. My mother-in-law became a very successful real estate agent. And raising a family and just accumulating things over time was a natural progression. One thing I do have to say, my mother-in-law is a meticulous housekeeper. But the accumulation of stuff over a 30-year time period and then making the decision to downsize from this two-story house to a two-bedroom home on the Russian River is a big difference, right? So the garage full of stuff, just stuff, right? And I watched them, it took them 2 years to systematically go through everything that they needed to go through. They were having to pay to get rid of their stuff. So what ends up happening is that this accumulation that naturally happens in life, you get to a certain point, it's like a bell curve, and that accumulation of stuff pretty soon becomes a burden. And then you spend the next, 2, 4, 5, 10 years trying to just get rid of all this stuff. I watched my mom go through it when my grandmother passed away, and same thing. It took her about 2 years to do right by all that stuff, to make sure that they were, not just willy-nilly throwing things away. And so what ends up happening is these things that you're consuming as you go along, as I mentioned, they become a hardship for you rather than something that you're really, really enjoying.
Right. And so there's a couple of things that you can do to manage and control that and maybe not keep it from happening, because we are accumulators, but certainly put it into a way that is more manageable. And in the past, we've talked about the gatekeeper habit. And this is a habit where before you bring anything into your house, you determine, do I absolutely love it? Do I absolutely need it? Or is there some other way I can accomplish the same thing without getting it? And we have a video on this. Melissa, how can you see applying the gatekeeper habit to this whole concept of this bell curve of dealing with stuff?
Yeah, so a huge part of this, we want to be very careful. When we talk about money and when we talk about spending, it's not about not spending. It is not about frugality. It really just is about being purposeful. But what ends up happening is, as you go through life, there are times where you are going to accumulate things. There are going to be needs in the time. The challenge is that sometimes we are just kind of mass consuming, but other times we're also not letting go of things at the time that we should, which we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But it's really this idea of making sure that as you're choosing to bring things into your home, you're really weighing those. You're giving your home room to breathe. You're only bringing in stuff that you absolutely love. And that way your quality of life is going up simply by the fact that you are surrounded by things that you truly get enjoyment out of. I had a conversation with a financial advisor up in Washington that I've been talking with for a couple of months now. We've been working for a couple of months, and we were talking today. And they live a lovely life, right? They travel, they love to spend on travel. They're gift givers. They love giving each other gifts. And at a macro level, they've become really, really good about this gatekeeper idea, right? Really weighing the $1,000 items. Where he is struggling and really hoping that we can help him, and we've been having these conversations, is in the hundreds dollars, right? Items, those particular items, and sometimes even in the lower thousands, right? He can decide that he doesn't need a $100,000 car and he'll get the $30,000 car, but he's struggling down when we're talking about a particular piece of furniture and weighing that they were just consuming and getting it. And so I introduced him the hell yeah concept, which is one of my favorites. I learned from Derek Sievers in a Tim Ferriss podcast. And that is, if you're looking at an item or even an experience, if it's not a hell yeah and you're super excited about it, then it's a no. And so it's one of the things that you can just think about in this gatekeeper idea of the kind of stuff that you're going along to purchase. Just weigh that. If it's, do I need it? Well, if you need it, get it. But other than that, if it's not a hell yeah or spark joy or however you want to phrase it, then you're going to go ahead and leave that there, and just that gives you room in your garage for things that down the road you will get excited about, that you will want to do your garage, your home, whatever that might be. So did I nail everything on that, Kevin, that we had wanted to talk about that particular habit?
I think so. There's one other aspect that is worth considering, and that's that even if it is a hell yeah, it may be helpful to stop and think, before I bring this into my house, where am I going to put it?
Yes.
Because if you don't have a place for something, then it becomes clutter, and you're moving it around, you're trying to shift it around. So, and there are multiple solutions to that. It can be, oh, I know that I'm going to have a place for it. I know exactly where this is going to go. It can be, I'm going to take something out and put this in its place. Or as my sister has advised me, as you know, my wife collects antiques. When our house started getting full up, my sister's solution was build a second story on my house so we'd have a place to put more of my wife's stuff.
Your house is like a museum. Why not?
So I don't care what your solution is, but think about it and have a solution before you bring it into your house. If the solution is I'm going to add on to my house to make room for it, and you can afford it, go for it. We're not going to judge. But using that concept of the gatekeeper of saying, is this something I really, really want, and do I have a place for it before you bring it in? That kind of helps to head off this financial bell curve on the first part of the curve. You're not accumulating as much stuff. Next thing to talk about is, what if it's already there? What if you're cresting that bell curve and now you're looking at, I've got this stuff in there. What do I do? Well, one of the things that you can do is use life events as a trigger for when you take a look at whether you need things or not. Melissa and I were talking about this subject earlier, and I said, yeah, on your kid's 18th birthday, that's probably a good time to go look at all the baby stuff that you've been holding on to in the garage for the past 18 years, because you're probably not going to need that again. And that's a bit facetious, but it's still the idea of certain life events can help inspire you to evaluate what your possessions are and whether you need them or not. Things like, if you're moving a house, like happened to Melissa's in-laws, if you're moving, rather than just mindlessly packaging things up and moving them and worrying about them later, that's a triggering event. Take that time to go through and decide, do you want to really move this stuff or do you want to get rid of it? For some people, significant.
Well, I was going to say that's a challenge for procrastinators, because we push to the last minute and then you have no choice and you're throwing stuff into boxes. And so that really takes some pre-planning and some effort on the front side, but your future self, when you're all moved in, is going to thank you for it.
Going to thank you so much for it. And the other thing,
your future self.
And the other thing is that a lot of these significant events are well known in advance. Very few people wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to sell my house and go move into a new house tomorrow. Usually that's something you plan for months. And so you should have the time to not procrastinate and plan to include that in the moving process. Other events, significant birthdays can be a triggering event. I was bemoaning as we're preparing this article, I had to do a bit of self-confession and tell Melissa that up in the crawl space above my garage, I have all my college textbooks and all my college notes. When I graduated from school and started working, those were valuable resources. But at some point, my work experience and education outpaced my college education and experience. I haven't looked at those notes in close to 30 years. Why am I still holding on to them? Because they're out of sight. But it's very easy to say, on my 50th birthday, I probably should have thought that, okay, it's time to let those go. Okay, well,
Do you,
maybe by my 60th birthday I will. Who knows?
I just have this vision of Lita poking holes in the ceiling and throwing your college stuff out to make room for her second story of antique holdings.
That is definitely a possibility. But so those type of triggering events, birthdays can be significant events. Another one that may not be quite so obvious as a triggering event is getting interested in a new hobby. Because if you're getting interested in a new hobby, maybe you're no longer interested in an old hobby, and you can take that opportunity to go look at something that you were really interested in 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you haven't touched it in the past 5, 6, 7 years. So get rid of those things so you have room for the new stuff that's coming in. So it's the idea of just looking at these life events that may cause you to think, what's in my house? Do I really need to keep this or not? Now, some of us hold on to things for sentimental reasons for a very long time. I'm one of those people. My sister's the exact opposite. There is nothing in my sister's house that is more than about 7 years old. She changes her furniture. She changes everything. She changes all the pictures. There's nothing in her house that is older than about 7 years. She just does not want to have any of that. That's really nice in one respect, because she knows exactly what's in there. Everything is in that house is what she is interested in right now.
Yeah, that's a challenge. There is something about that, because on one hand, when you're a very active person and you're the type of person that likes trying a lot of different hobbies, often what will happen is you're engrossed in your current hobby, and as you're walking past the three other hobbies, the stuff for the three other hobbies, there's a psychological, a little bit of hit, right? Oh man, I used to love surfing. I used to love skiing, but I'm really into this right now. And you know what, maybe it's hiding those things for a while, or creating a deadline for when you're going to actually make the decision about what you're going to get rid of them. But there is something about that, is that when those things to some extent are a visual drag on your emotions as you're trying to enjoy this new thing. And we're adventurers. We love, we've got, what did you say, Kevin, about our hobbies? You had two very perfect words for them.
They're they're very disparate, not desperate, disparate. They're very spread out, and they're very eclectic. And our friends very much share in that. A lot of our friends have very unusual hobbies, and a lot of them. And we do a lot of things, not necessarily all well, but we do a lot of things. We enjoy them. So there's nothing wrong with having multiple hobbies. What we're talking about is that if there's something that used to be a hobby and you're not doing any longer, get rid of the stuff, because it's not serving any purpose. And somebody else who is just getting into that hobby can enjoy that.
Yeah, and especially if you're having to pay for like a storage unit or something like that to house those items. The amount of clients that we have worked with over the last 8-9 years that have had that experience, and then they finally get in there and they pull those things out and they realize it's a surfboard they're never going to use again. It's a motorcycle that they've decided they don't want to do that anymore. And they have truly wasted thousands of dollars that could have been spent on something that would truly give them enjoyment. So that's one thing to consider.
I think that's the key, is you don't want to have your possessions be a burden to your future self. And there's two aspects of that. Decluttering is very much a hot topic, and there's a lot of people talking about it in different ways. So that's one aspect, is you just don't want to have the psychological impact of walking by these things and having the mess. But the other thing that, Melissa, you just touched on is those things that are sitting around that you're not using, that's cash that's just moldering away. A perfect example, if you used to surfboard and you no longer surf, or if you used to scuba dive and you no longer dive, all that equipment can be sold, and that's a bit of money. And a lot of people put a lot of money, thousands of dollars, into their hobbies. Hobbies are important. I'm not saying not to do that. God knows I've done it. But
I do.
But if you're not doing the hobbies anymore, that money is just sitting there. And if you sell those items, you can apply that money to what interests you and what brings you pleasure in your life now. And so, again, it's all about prioritizing. It's all about being purposeful and mindful of what you have, so that you are using it to the best of your ability there.
It's a way of unburdening. It's just, there's, again, even if there's plenty of room in the garage, there's just seeing that stuff that you're not using. There's a level of subconscious kind of guilt that it can just kind of start to chip away at you. Let go of that stuff. Nobody's got time or energy for that.
Yeah.
You talk about not wanting to get trapped by your possessions. This is really challenging. And I want to be very careful, because I don't want this to become a very morbid conversation, but to be quite frank, you're going to hit that bell curve. And at some point, it may become challenging for you physically to go through your own stuff, right? We've worked with a lot of clients that they've ended up having to hire somebody to help them to go through those storage units, because it just got to a point they could not physically do it themselves. The fact of the matter is that you want to be the one who's going through that and doing that, and you don't want loved ones or perfect strangers to be doing that for you. Yeah. This is the reason I want to be careful about this conversation is because if this was maybe 10 years ago, let me just say, if this was 16 years ago, I would have been like, la, 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 la. I don't have this conversation. I don't want to think about something happening. I don't want to think about any of that. And then as you get a little bit older and you have the experiences of like when my husband's mom passed away and us having to go through her home, right? And just, my mom's experience with my grandmother, and Kevin, your experience with your mom,
with my
right? Mother. We don't want to do it. We don't want to have to go through that. But the fact is that if you don't, somebody else will. So that idea of just being in control of that, there's something about that, right? And man, my mom, I just had a conversation with her on Tuesday. She's like, okay, I want the china that I got when I got married to go to your niece here. It's like, okay, you're taking this too far. Can we have a conversation where we're not talking about you disseminating your stuff?
You actually just brought up a good point. So, and it kind of follows along. So what we're talking about here is we don't want to be a burden to your future self. You don't want to be a burden to your loved ones. Another aspect of looking at things is you have a couple of choices with what to do with things that you have in your house. You can keep them, you can sell them, you can get rid of them. The other thing that you can think about doing is if you have something in your house that you haven't been using, you can use it. This is something that's really common. I don't know how common it is now. It used to be a lot common in Melissa's grandmother's time, my mom's time, where the house would have the good china or the good furniture, and we never had the good furniture. That was something that even predated us. But I would hear stories about people who, like, the family was not allowed to sit on the good furniture because it was for guests. We didn't go that far, but we did have good china that was really, really nice, and maybe we would use once or twice a year. If you have things in your house that are taking up space that you don't want to get rid of that are really, really nice, use them. If you have good dishes, Melissa, you wrote an article on this years ago. The whole idea of with the tea sets,
teacups. Yeah, I still use them
you have
regularly.
Really nice materials like that. If you have really nice tea set or really nice dishes, use them, because the worst thing that's going to happen is that they're going to get broken, or they're going to sit on a shelf somewhere, and they're just going to be pretty to look at, and nobody's ever going to get
decorative. Yeah.
Use them and enjoy them. And when you're drinking the tea, when you're eating the food, enjoy that experience.
So what I love so much about that is, man, life should be enjoyed. Your stuff should be enjoyed, right? And there's something about ritual that just speaks to my soul, because you're having a moment with ritual. You are having a moment. And why not eat pizza on the good china, right? You're going to do that with your kids. They're going to remember that, right? It's just like, I could jump on the table right now and talk about this for the next 2 hours, but Kevin won't let me. For your good, he won't let me. But no, it's so true. And that's what really, this is a bit of a hard conversation for us to wrap up for you, because on one hand, we're saying the very number one, be mindful of what you're bringing in the first place, right? If you need it, great, that's fantastic, bring it in. If otherwise, if it's not a hell yeah, or it doesn't spark joy, or however you want to like take it, or if there's something else you can use, just have that gatekeeper. Don't just buy out of habit, right? We say that all the time, though. That is not anything new. But what is new is this idea of giving triggers to let go of the things that are no longer serving you, you are editing your life as you go along, right? We talk a lot about that as well. Editing the life you want is in the editing of stuff. And then the third one about getting trapped by your own possessions, right? So if you're, use it, enjoy it, get rid of it, but just again, edit. The overall message is edit as you go along, right? We are all in different stages of our lives, right? A lot of us are still in that accumulation stage. And then we're going to get to that point where it's just like, you know what, I'm just going to feel better if I'm letting go of the, of this stuff, unless you're married to an accumulator or a collector. And then you're screwed.
Much. I just consider it an investment. At some point, we'll sell it all off and retire on it.
Antiques in your house, swords in my house. Exactly. My husband's an artist, so it's like the stuff, the pins, all the art stuff. But he's worth keeping.
Oh, there you go. So one thing that, Melissa had said this earlier, and we want to really emphasize is we are not talking about minimalism. We're not talking about doing without. What we're talking about is taking the time to be purposeful in what you bring into your house and what you keep into your house. And the real focus of this discussion is looking at life events that can trigger you to examine that, to go through and look and see, at this stage of my life, are these items still as useful and as enjoyable as they were when I got them? And if the answer is yes, you keep them. If the answer is no, you go ahead and get rid of them one way or the other. You sell them, trade them in, throw them away, depending on, donate them, do whatever. All right. It's just really a matter of being purposeful and using your life events to trigger you to think that way.
Beautiful. Right. Beautiful. I think you wrapped it up geniusly.
Right. Okay. So if you're interested in more tips on how to be purposeful in your life and how to live the life that you want now while being responsible and planning well for your future, make sure to visit us at thesavvylife.com. We're very excited. We have a new website, and we put a bit of time into it, so we're really excited. So go check that out. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram. We do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, so please look at both Melissa and myself on LinkedIn. Ask to connect, and we love to talk about this stuff. This is what we do. This is our passion.
Yep. Hence the threat to jump on tables and talk for 10 hours. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thank you.